There lived a woman with her two daughters and of course her stepdaughter. She does not allow her daughters to work except only when it is necessary. Her stepdaughter, Enitan, was always the one doing the house chores, including going to the farm. Enitan's father was a farmer who taught his daughter the act of farming as early as when Enitan was 3 years old. She was called Enitan because she lost her mother some minutes after she was born. Her father had no choice than to remarry another woman who automatically became Enitan's stepmother. Unfortunately, the woman Enitan's father remarried was a very wicked soul. She never allowed her daughters to join their father on the farm. Likewise, she was always causing trouble in the neighborhood and never gave her husband rest. There was no one she could not fight with. Her husband had cautioned her several times, but she would not listen. If she had not argued or fought with someone in a day, she would not be alright. Ironically, there was no one Enitan's stepmother could not fight with. Whether you are old or young, fat or thin, no one. She had a fatal fight on a day Enitan will never forget. Sadly, it was her dear father that bore the consequence. Enitan's father fell and hit his head on a big rock while he was trying to stop his stubborn wife from fighting with a hefty man. It was the heavy man's punch that took him down. That was how the poor Enitan became an orphan at a very tender age. Now, Enitan is 18 years old and had been struggling to live with a stiff-necked stepmother ever since. Despite the fact that she was a female, she had been the one who sustained her father's farm and never allowed thorns or weeds to grow over in the farm. She would be the one to work, but her stepmother and her sisters would be the ones to eat more when it comes to harvest time. One fateful day, as she was working on her father's farm, the prince who loved nature so much and would always take a walk in the morning and evening was attracted by the cry of a bird in pain. Its legs had been entangled and needed to be set free. At the same time, Enitan heard the painful cry of that bird. She wanted to ignore it but changed her mind. She traced the sound to where the bird was. Luckily for her, she got there before the handsome prince. Immediately, she began to untangle the rope, and the prince saw her helping the bird. He hid behind the leaves to watch from a close distance. Unknown to Enitan that was being watched, she set the bird free into the air and went back to her father's farm. The prince followed closely. He was amazed to find such a beautiful, hardworking, and kind-hearted girl. Maybe this angel can end the fight between me and my father, the prince thought silently. The king had been disturbing his son to get married, but he had refused. He would always claim that he had not seen his choice. After a while, Enitan decided to go home. The handsome prince followed secretly and wished he could be watching her all day long. When he got to the palace, he was very excited. Everyone knew something had happened to the prince, including the king. The following day, the prince traced Enitan to her father's farm again. Enitan was there, working on the farm. Unknown to the prince, there was a big snake close to where he was spying from. Enitan bent a little to pick up a fruit on the floor, and this exposed a beautiful shape. The prince had to step further in order to see her adorable shape. Suddenly, he stepped on the snake's tail and he got what he asked for. Swiftly, the snake turned around angrily, bit the prince's left leg, and crawled away fast. The prince fell and shouted in pain as he held onto the place where the snake just bit him. His scream attracted Enitan, who looked towards the place where the shouts came from. She rushed to where the prince was and looked around. She saw a big green snake trying to escape beneath the green plant. Boldly, Enitan took a big plank and moved towards the snake. The prince wanted to tell her to stop, but he had no strength to talk again. The venom released by the snake had started flowing in his veins. Enitan threw the plank at the snake. She deliberately targeted the head, but the snake was fast enough to escape it. The plank landed in its middle. This slowed down the pace of the snake. No more planks to throw. Enitan thought of what she could do to totally defeat the snake. The prince's leg started bleeding. He cried out more as more blood flowed down to his big toe. Enitan remembered she saw a big stone while she was making ridges earlier. She ran to the spot and carried the stone with the remaining strength left in her. The prince was in pain, but he could still see the whole drama being performed by the one he had chosen to love and cherish. Courageously, Enitan moved closer to the struggling snake. She smashed the heavy stone on its head. This time, she was on target. The stone bruised the head of the green snake, and that was how Enitan was able to kill it. The prince saw the whole thing, but closed his eyes when Enitan turned to look at him. Like a flash, Enitan ran back to where the prince was lying down. He looked pale and lifeless. She put his head on her lap and tried to check the injured leg. The prince loved it. He smiled because it felt good. At that moment, he wished he could stay with her forever. Then, Enitan remembered the leaf her father once told her about in the farm. She was just 6 years old at that time. It was a special leaf that could remove the venom of any snake bite in the body of humans. She placed the prince's head gently on the floor and stood up. The prince was hungry. Why would she remove my head from her soft slaps? He asked himself. He shouted more and more so as to get Enitan's attention. Within 3 minutes, she was back at his side with some fresh leaves he had never seen before. She rubbed it on her palms repeatedly before applying it on his leg. At first, the pain became unbearable, but later it relieved the prince to the extent that he almost didn't feel any pain there again. Young man, I believe you are fine now, Enitan said softly and smiled at the prince. The prince loved her soft voice. That smile meant a lot to him too. He smiled back and answered, Thank you for saving me from dying, my heroine. I have never seen a girl single-handedly kill a snake in my life. He was enjoying her company. You need to be watchful next time, Enitan warned the prince. Actually, I was watching you, the prince confessed. Enitan looked away. She was confused. How will a handsome young man be secretly watching her? Who is she that one would devote his time to watch? She is the first child of the family, but lived like a maid. The thought made her frown her face. The prince misunderstood it and felt he should apologize. I am sorry if I have offended you. The prince started to say something, but Enitan stood up. No, you didn't. I need to leave the farm now, Enitan said as she walked away. The prince tried to follow, but he had forgotten that he wouldn't be able to use that leg to walk well for about 3 days. He forgot to ask for her name. He pleaded with her to come back, but Enitan was gone already. When the prince got back to the palace, he told the king all that had happened to him. The king was grateful his son survived the snake bite. He commanded his guards to bring Enitan to the palace with immediate effect. Unfortunately, when they got to Enitan's house, it was her stepmother they met. She lied to them that Enitan was not at home. When they left, she sent Enitan on an errand to a faraway place where she may not return in 3 days. She told her daughters to be prepared just in case the prince came to visit them. Grudgingly, Enitan accepted to go, despite the fact that she knew her stepmother was into something fishy. Enitan's first stepsister looked so much like her. They have the same complexion, height, and face. Even their voices sounded alike. If you are not careful, you may think it is Enitan by mere looking at her, but on a closer look, you will realize she is not Enitan. Her name was Eniola. Eniola wasn't composed and well-mannered like Enitan. Similarly, Eniola could hardly do any household chores nor cultivate in the farm. Her mother never allowed her, and she never had the intention to learn. Eniola wore Enitan's clothes as instructed by her mother. She grumbled as she put on Enitan's old clothes. Not quite long, a knock was heard on their doorstep. It was the prince. He came to look for Enitan by himself. He was supported by 2 guards. He greeted Enitan's stepmother well before asking for Enitan. The wicked woman called Eniola out as Enitan. Eniola came out, displaying a set of brown teeth and trying to smile like Enitan. The prince was confused. He blinked his eyes repeatedly. The one I know has a beautiful set of white teeth and does not try to force a smile. Yet they have the same face, voice, and she is putting on her clothes. What exactly is happening here? The prince thought. Still on her way to deliver the message of her stepmother, Enitan met an old woman who asked her for the way to a particular place. She greeted the old woman and told her she was close to her destination. The old woman thanked her but refused to leave. She stared at Enitan for a long time and told her everything that was happening back at home. "You must go back now, my daughter. If not, the prince will marry your stepsister." "Thank you, old one. But what about the errand?" Enitan asked. "Leave that and hurry back to the village." "Go," the old woman commanded. Enitan raced back home. On getting back, she was told that the prince had taken Eniola to the palace. Then she remembered the old woman's words. Hurriedly, Enitan ran to the palace where the prince was already showing Eniola to the king. When they saw her, they were all confused. Eniola lied that she was the one that saved the prince. Enitan claimed too that she was the real one. The prince was scared, so he moved away from the 2 girls. One of the king's special advisors, who had been quietly observing the 2 girls, got a clue that Enitan was the real one. He called the king to one corner and whispered into his ears. The king in turn nodded affirmatively. He told everyone to go out, including the prince, except the 2 girls. When he was alone with the 2 girls, he told them that whoever brings the leaf that was used to neutralize the snake's venom would be the prince's wife. They were both given 3 days to get the antidote. Eniola went home looking disappointed. She knew nothing about farming or herbs. How will she be able to get the desired leaf? She told her mother everything. Her mother told her not to worry, that she will find a way of getting it for her. The following day, when Enitan got to the farm, she discovered that all the grass had been cut by unknown persons and packed away. Who could do this? She checked the place where the antidote normally grew. It was no longer there. No single leaf was left. On the 3rd day, Enitan summoned courage to go to the farm, despite the fact that she could not get the leaf that would change her story around for good. Then, she remembered the old woman she helped some days ago was plucking some leaves before she asked her for the way. Those leaves, the leaves are also antidotes. As if in a trance, Enitan's mind wandered into the past. Clearly, she could hear the echo of her father's words the day he showed her the leaves years ago. "My daughter, there are 2 magical leaves that can control the effect of a snake poison. One is in my farm and the other one grows near my mother's farm at Itado. They are all the same. They both have a bitter taste, but the difference is that one has a smooth surface, while the other one that grows in my mother's farm has a rough surface. Instead of going to her father's farm, she went directly to her grandmother's land, exactly the place where she met the strange old woman. When she got there, she fumbled with her hands as she searched through the overgrown land for the antidote with a rough surface. After a fruitless search, she was about to give up when she saw it, the antidote with the rough surface. After taking enough leaves, she wrapped it closely in a cloth and raced back to the palace. Eniola, her stepsister, was already there with the antidote. The prince looked closely at the two girls and discovered that the one that just came was Enitan. She smiled as soon as she saw the prince despite the stress. Eniola, who had been around a few minutes ago, didn't remember to smile because she had a fight with her mother before coming to the palace. Her mother, who had promised to get the leaf for her, had failed. Her plan was to follow Enitan to the farm on the third day to see if she could still get a leaf from the ones that were cut down by the men she had hired. When that was not possible again, Eniola became angry. She blamed her mother for killing her father. Her mother in turn cursed her and decided not to follow her to the palace. Unknown to them, Enitan had changed her route that day. Instead of going to her father's farm, she went to her grandmother's land. Thus, mother and daughter became enemies. Eniola had concluded in her mind that she would tell everyone the truth, but would pretend she had the antidote. When the king asked the two girls to produce the antidote, Eniola signaled to Enitan to bring hers out first. She did. The king looked at his special advisor to get his approval. The old man nodded in approval. The prince's eyes brightened up. I said it. That is my angel. I knew it from the beginning. When the king told Eniola to produce her own antidote, she burst into tears. She confessed to everyone that she wasn't the one that saved the prince. She narrated everything and how her mother lured her into disguising as Enitan. The prince rushed to hug Enitan. Enitan could not but shed tears of joy. At last, God has vindicated her. The king was angry with Eniola's mother. She was later banished from the land. Enitan got married to the prince and they both lived happily ever after.